Hey everyone, this is Kevin from thechesswebsite.com, and today we're going to be continuing our middle game strategies and tactics videos. I had a lot of requests in the last video that I need more middle game strategies and tactics, that's really helping you guys out as far as gaining your knowledge in chess. And so, as many of you know, I try to make my videos based on recommendations and requests, and so that's what I'm going to do. Along with my normal openings and traps videos, I'm going to try to do more and more with middle game tactics and strategies that I think will help improve everyone's game. And today we're going to be focusing on the F7 square. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know that in particular for black, for white it would be the F2 square, but for black, the F7 square is a very, very vulnerable square, especially at the beginning. Later on in the game, you're really looking for different things, but in the early and mid game, you're definitely looking at the F7 square as a huge weakness for black. But I really want to, in this video, talk about when you should be attacking and when you shouldn't be, because a lot of people hear the F7 square is a weakness, so every game I play I just want to go at it. And you really need to understand that when you play chess, especially going into the middle game, a lot of what you're looking for in the middle game is determined by the opening that you play. So you may have an opening repertoire that you play that really does not suit you best to attack the F7 square, or your opponent may be playing a defense that's really not going to attack the F7 square and have good results. It's going to be blocking that F7 square. So that's what we are going to be looking at today. First thing you want to notice in the opening of a game is if you play e4, you're going to have more opportunities to attack your opponent's F7 square than you would if you played d4. Now, why is that? And that's simply because when you play e4, your opponent, more times than not, now there are many different variations of chess, but a lot of times he's going to play a move similar to e5, or he wants to play e5 later on. Now from here it doesn't matter. Some players like to play knight to f3, some players immediately like to play bishop to c4. That's not really what I want to focus on. What I do want to focus on is it doesn't matter where we come out. As you can see, this e pawn for black is not protecting this f7 square. And from here, you're normally not going to see pawn to d5. You just don't see that very often. You may see pawn to d6 though if you're playing the Philidor defense. Then as you can see here, both of these pawns, d6 and e5, neither of these pawns are defending this pawn on f7. So now if we were to bring our bishop to c4, you can see right away that this light square bishop attacking this f7 square, we're going to have a very good attack on this however we want to proceed. But if we reverse it and look at pawn to d4, a lot of times black will respond with pawn to d5. Now as you can see, the big difference here, there's already one pawn here protecting this f7 square. You usually are going to be attacking the f7 square with your light square bishop. That's why in a lot of my videos you may hear that in early game the light square bishop is more powerful than the dark square bishop. Now later on I have made other videos on which bishops are better, but early on and in the middle game, a light square bishop is more powerful because he can attack the f7 square. But also keep in mind, a lot of times I open up with e4. So as you can see here, it doesn't really matter where white continues. Let's just continue with f3. It doesn't really matter. A lot of times you may see move from black similar to pawn to e6. Now as you can see, these may look similar, but as far as attacking the f7 square, they're very, very different. Now we have two pawns here on d5 and e6 that are both defending this f7 pawn. So it's going to be much harder for us to attack this f7 square, especially with our light square bishop. So keep in mind that although you always want to be attacking, in my opinion, and especially on the f7 square, it really depends on which opening both of you play. So if you're a d4 player for life, that's completely okay, but just keep in mind in the back of your head that f7 may not be your main focus for the rest of the game. Let's take a look at this example from white, and as you can see here, both sides have really just started to bring out some pawns into the game, and white has brought his bishop to c4, very common move for white. At the same time, you can see the light square bishop is attacking the f7 pawn. And really for the rest of the video, we're going to be talking about if the f7 square is a possibility to attack. Again, we've already seen that sometimes it's not right, and hopefully you can see in your own game when it's okay to attack the f7 square and when it's not. But from here, white really wants to continue his development. He really has one move that's out, and that's his bishop on c4. So he may bring his knight to f3. Very common move, development move at the same time. Bringing his knight to a central square where it can attack and defend the center. But from here, it's very important to notice that we're still attacking this f7 square, and if black's not careful, then we're going to run over him in the game. And so these are the things that you always want to look at, because a lot of times from here, a black player will say, you know what, he brought his knight to f3, and what happens anytime you bring your knight to f3? Well, I'm going to bring my bishop to g4, because we want to pin this knight down to this queen here. We can't move this knight anywhere, or else we'll take the queen. But what black does not see here is that his f7 square is very weak, and we can bring our queen to b3, and we're now attacking this undefended b7 square, and at the same time we're doubly attacking this square here on f7. So we're going to win a pawn here, and depending on how black tries to continue, we may go up a lot more in material. So as you can see here, since we noticed that we were attacking this f7 square, we were already looking for black to make a mistake, and once he did, then we pounced on it. Take a look at this position from white. It's very, very important to notice that even though we're farther along in the middle game, and even though we haven't attacked this f7 square, and even though black has already castled, we still have our light square bishop on this a2 square, and it's still attacking this f7 square, and it's also pinning down this pawn to this king here. This is still a very, very strong attack, and it's always good to have if you see black has his pawns on d6 and e5. It's always important if you can have a light square bishop along this light diagonal to always be putting pressure on this f7 square, because you never know down the road if you can attack this square and he can't move, and you can just pin this down to the king, and then you'll really have a strong attack. From here, white has a lot of different options. One of the options that he has is he can bring his pawn to f4 and really start to attack. As you can see, black is kind of in a passive state. He has his pawns kind of in a nice little formation here. His bishops aren't very active, and his pieces on the back row, much like ours, aren't doing much. But we can open up the game here with pawn to f4, and if he captures, then as you can see here, we can bring our rook into the action at rook to f4, and now we have two attackers against this f7 square. At the same time, if we wanted to, we could next bring our queen to the h5 square, putting another attacker on that f7. After we do that, we can also double up and bring our other rook to the f file, and this is going to be a very strong attack. But more importantly, you really want to focus that this bishop on a2 really allows us to start this attack. It would be almost futile if we just started throwing all our major pieces at this f7 square if we didn't have the support of our bishop on a2. So keep this in mind, even at the very beginning of the game. If you throw your bishop out here to c4 and you can't do an attack, if you can have this entire diagonal open, it's still very good. Even after the black castles, the black king castles, it's still going to be a very strong attack for you. So this has been the first video. There's going to be a few squares that I did want to go over on how to attack them and what you should look for. Very easy to know when you should be attacking the f7 square and when you shouldn't be. So when you should be just looking out for things, be looking out for when you should be attacking, what pieces you should be throwing at them, and just always keep this in the back of your mind. So hope you guys enjoyed this video, a little middle game tactic for all of you trying to improve your middle game, and just think of a few more things to look at while you're playing chess. The more things that you can see in chess, the better you will become as a chess player. So if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. I'm going to have a lot more of these videos coming out. In the near future, I'll be having a lot more videos on different squares and how to attack them. But if you haven't checked out the website, be sure and do that, www.thechesswebsite.com, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.
Hi everyone, this is International Master David Pruess for chess.com, and today I'm going to teach you how to attack. One of the most basic strategies of all in chess, right? Attacking. There's defending, there's waiting around. Attacking, obviously, the preference of most chess players, including myself. So when you want to attack, you're going to need to know two things to be a successful attacker. One is that your attacks will be more successful if you pick the right time and place. So you don't want to strike at the wrong time. And basically, the simplest way to know whether or not it's justified or a good idea to attack is comparing the number of attackers and defenders in a certain area of the board. That's it. You just say, right now I've got 5 attackers, he's got 2 defenders, I'm going to go for it. Or right now I've got 3 attackers and he's got 3 defenders, so I'm going to wait and bring in some more pieces. If you can bring in 3 more pieces and he can't bring in more pieces, then you'll be able to go for an attack once you get up to 5 or 6 pieces against 3 in the area. So that's the most important thing, and it's just that simple. Now I'm going to show you 2 other things. So these advices that are going to follow will help you to be successful with your attack. One of them is that it's useful to have a target when you attack. And I will show you that with one quick game right here. So we're going to blaze through it, and you're going to see an example of a game where somebody successfully attacks because they pick a target for their attack. So here we go, blazing through. You see that right away, Black has some preconditions for a kingside attack because they've got more pieces that can get to the kingside than White. So here, they start focusing on the target, which is G2. And they can aim a lot of pieces there, particularly their queen, their bishop, and their pawn. So White sets up a defense to G2, and Black keeps coming after it, sacrifices the bishop, and brings the knight to attack G2 as well. White takes the pawn, and Black gets his 3rd piece attacking the G2 square. And this kind of focused attack, where all his pieces aim at the same square, allows Black to win this game by checkmate here. If the queen is taken, the knight comes to H3, and otherwise the queen will just come to G2 next move with checkmate. All right, now, the second thing that can help you attack is to have open lines. So here's an example. And the first condition for an attack has been met. White has more pieces that are developed and in position to fight than Black, because Black has 3 pieces here that are really not well placed for attacking or defending. White can pretty easily bring out his last piece at will. So it helps for White to have a target or focus here, and the first target or focus is F7, which the queen and rook are aiming at. But the other thing White's going to do here that's really important is White's going to open up lines, which is just going to increase the power of all of White's potential attacking pieces. So watch what White does. White makes a trade because their bishop was attacked and now plays E5, happily sacrificing both White's central pawns in order to open up more space for all the White pieces. And White follows with a queen check and then bringing the rook into the center. Of course, if you ever want to win a chess game, you need to be able to calculate something, and the key thing that White has calculated is that the Black queen can't stay in the center to defend because this would trap her. That was the one key tactical point in this game. So anyway, the Black queen moved out of the center, and now you see White sort of focusing in on these squares on the F-file as he attacks, and now it's just mopping up, just a little calculation to checkmate the Black king. And with these open lines, you see that the White pieces are very, very, very powerful. And that is checkmate in one move. So you should be ready to attack now. Hey everybody, this is International Master David Pruess for chess.com, and today we're covering a really fundamental strategy for chess, which is how to attack on an open e-file when you have been so fortunate or clever as to castle while your opponent has not. And the e-file becomes open. The e-file, of course, is the file of residence for both kings. So how to attack when that file is open and you've castled and your opponent hasn't. Obviously, it's a very favorable situation for you, but it's still good to know how to knock him out, right? So this being as fundamental as it is, I'm doing 3 different videos with examples on it. One classic video, a Morphe massacre, and a second classic video, which is going to be more advanced than this video, which is covering a Steinitz game. But this one here, we're going to see a pretty simple game in order to illustrate the principles very simply and clearly. First of all, let's go quickly through this opening. A two knights defense. Black plays aggressively, leaving c6 undefended, counterattacking f2. And in this position, you could still play bishop d7 to defend c6, but black castles, offering a sacrifice of material, which white accepts with knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, knight takes, and then grabbing on c6 after all these trades, and further attacking the rook and the pawn. So the first step in attacking on an open e-file is, of course, to keep your opponent's king from castling. And thus far, we've seen in my video about how to prevent your opponent from castling. So the bishop comes to this nice weak diagonal, and white's going to have to figure out something to do about their king. But before he tends to his king, he decided to tend to the hanging rook. So white captures the rook. Now, black needs to develop an attack here. Okay, so moves like queen takes a8 aren't quite going to cut it. Okay, white's going to play queen d2 and knight to c3 and castle queenside. When you play rook e8, he'll play f4, and you can play f6 trying to open up this file, but you're just not in time, right? Knight c3, and you take, and white will castle to safety. Or he could play queen takes d5 check and trade queens. So, black here needs to play a pretty threatening move, and actually he has a fantastic one to start building his attack and initiative. Not a super obvious move, actually, but black can bring his queen to a square from which it makes two threats. Two threats are better than one, and black is now threatening to take on g2, which is big because it would actually trap white's rook potentially, right, and prevent white from ever castling kingside, and to play queen takes e5 check, which would create the open e-file for attacking purposes. Now here, white has more than one possible defense, so let us just look at one or two possible moves for white. First, queen to d5. Now, black has more than one good move he can play here. One nice move is just to come to the open file, with the point that if white takes, black can play checkmate. But I believe this move actually fails to this tricky move from white, blocking the queen's attack. And if black takes the queen, white will take the queen and remain ahead of rook. And if black takes the pawn instead, white will take the rook and checkmate the black king on the back rank. So rook d8 looks very nice, but I think what black needs to do here is play queen check, almost checkmating the white king, the queen's forced back, and now queen takes b2, attacking the rook and the pawn on e5. If black captures the rook, then material is already equal, so the most obvious move we need to consider for white is knight d2, but that move fails to a simple checkmate on the e-file, right? So there you have it. First way to win with an attack on the open e-file, a simple crisscrossed checkmate. So that deals with queen takes, pawn on d5. So white's other good defenses are knight c3 and queen d2. So knight c3 is played in the game, so we'll look at queen d2 first. And black will take this pawn with check. And the white king could boogie, or white could block with his queen. If the white king just sort of heads over this way, there's more than one nice thing that black could do, but actually basically the simplest thing for black to do would be to just capture this bishop. Because now you've got a situation where you're not down very much material, you've got a bishop against a rook, and the white king is stuck in the center for good. And furthermore, you've got threats like queen takes b2 and knight e4. So that is like the simplest approach, and it will certainly lead to a winning position for black. So queen e5 check, queen e3. Black's now going to play queen takes b2. And white can't capture black's knight because of queen c1 checkmate. So in this position, white can really give up with a safe conscience about that. There was no defense available. So the game continues with the move knight to c3. And now black's going to open the e-file. That's always step 2. Queen takes e5 check. Now, very important, the white king can't run away because black has the move queen f4 check, forcing him back onto the open e-file. And now rook e8, finishing him off because the only piece that can block is the knight, and the bishop is also on that square. So that wins for black. He could take with his rook, he could take with his bishop, he could attack the knight in extra time with his queen, he could do whatever there. Okay, so king d2 is not really a defense, so white plays his knight to e2 to block the file. So now we have the typical scenario where you have an open attack on the e-file. And the key is very, very often going to be how many times you can attack the piece that's going to block the file. So black has nicely coordinated already with the bishop and the queen on e2. The key thing you want to calculate is, do you have enough pieces attacking e2 so that if your opponent castled, you could win the piece on e2? In this position, the answer is already yes. Black has 2 attackers and white has 2 defenders, and one of them is the king. So if white castles, the knight will be undefended. The thing to do here for black is you simply capture that bishop on a8, and if white castles, you'll capture on e, which is enough to win if you know how to play the endgame. Good luck with that. So black captures this piece, and white is now going to struggle around trying to get an extra defender onto e2 so that he can then evacuate his king. One thing you'll sometimes see people do is play like f3, king f2, and bring their rook over. The thing that white does in the game is he plays f4 to try and gain 1 extra tempo on the queen compared to that. But let's look at f3 for a moment. So if white plays f3, what should black do? The first thing you want to look at is, can you just attack this piece enough times to capture and win it? The second thing you would look for is, can you prevent king f2? So if you thought of queen e3, that's in the right direction of things you should be looking at, but actually you're looking in the wrong order. First, you want to look at rook e8 and see if white has any defense for his knight on e2. And the answer is, he doesn't. Okay, and this is the simplest way to win. You just pile up on that piece, and when you get to, 3 attackers to 2 defenders, you take it. So in the game, white plays f4, and the black queen moves to e4. Now, if white moves his king to f2 to try and bring his rook over, what should black do about this? The answer is you have to do a little calculation. The first thing to look at was, of course, rook to e8, and then you saw white can defend with rook to e1. You will look if you have any kind of follow-up there. You can also look for moves that would prevent this by trying to check the white king. So, for example, this move here is a totally good move to think of, followed by taking this pawn with check, right? And you're hoping to force the white king back onto the first rank to keep his rook from coming out. And then, he would block with his queen, and you would play knight e4 check, and you will actually force the white king back to the first rank and get probably a winning position for black. Because if white is unable to get his rooks around his king, this knight is going to continue to be better than either of his rooks, and black will have a winning attack. But the simplest approach here for black is actually to calculate the rook e8 move an extra step. After rook to e1, you can check the white king, keeping it from running into the corner. The white king is forced back to f1, and then you follow in with knight to e4, which is even stronger than taking this pawn with check, right? You don't want to make his king move away. You move your knight in, threatening checkmate, and white cannot defend himself. The only move that you might be thinking looks like a defense is queen here, but black would capture it, and the knight can't recapture because of this diagonal. So after f4, queen e4, white did not try moving his king because of that checkmating attack. Instead, he brings the rook over to defend the knight from f2. Now, what move should you look at first for black? Before you look at trying to prevent white's idea, you look at, can I just build up and win by attacking this? So that is actually how you can win. So black plays rook to e8, allows white to bring his rook to a good defensive square. And now black is just going to bring in an extra attacking unit. Okay, this is really, really the key. If your opponent has any ability to defend, they will have 2 or 3 pieces that will defend e2. You will bring the first wave of your forces to aim at it, and then you'll reach a little bit of a stalemate. Now, it's a long, long road for this rook to get into the game. That gives you some time, but what you need to figure out is a way to get extra attackers. Okay, sometimes you can find extra angles of attack, like if on this move here, you had tried taking on g2 and sort of opening up more of this area of the board to find extra angles to attack the white king. That's definitely one valid approach. But the most common approach is that you just find a way to beat up on this even more. And so one option is to move the knight to e6 and then to d4 or f4. It's very logical, right, to try and bring this knight to attack white's knight. It turns out there's an even easier way, which couples with a second technique, which you always want to do, which is to open more lines, right? So black plays d4 here. The idea is that black will play d3, bringing a new attacker on the knight. So let me make a passing move for white. Black will play d3, new attacker on the knight. White takes it. Black brings in a new attacker with the knight. Now, this knight isn't attacking e2, but after, say, white's king moves, you're removing the defender by taking the rook. And it's a massacre, right? So what you see here is a mix of trying to bring in more pieces and also opening new lines, right? By trading the 2 pawns like this, you've opened new space from which to attack white. So in this position, white has absolutely no move that stops d3. It's such a good move. If he moves his king off of the file, he's still on the diagonal, right? So you still play d3 attacking the knight. And when he takes, you take with the knight, and you're threatening knight takes f2. There's just no defense here. The rook can move, and then the knight could come to b2 attacking the queen, or f4 attacking e2, and white's going to lose the piece on e2 eventually that's been so focused on by black. Okay, but it's really, really important that you have some kind of focus in your attacks and not just attack randomly all over the place. So, I mean, the game just ended with white playing b4, and black playing his knight to a4. You could also calculate d3 with a strong attack, but knight a4 is so good because you're also happy to bring your knight to c3, right? And white just resigned because he can't stop knight c3, and the knight on e2 will die. So that is how to manage an attack on an open e-file with the most straightforward of methods, just bringing every piece to bear on whatever is blocking that file, right? And the technique of opening up new lines when necessary, and the technique of doing some calculating. We will also have a more complex example, so you can check for that under classic games.